In this episode, a sustainable design lab that typically works at the level of product design and business strategy is turning to green chemistry to magnify the power of their offerings. The organization is called Schoolab, and I'm joined by Kelly Chou, program manager of their Deplastify the Planet program at the University of California, Berkeley. Welcome, Kelly. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, James. Really happy to be here.
What is this program, broadly speaking? What is Schoolab and what does it do?
Yep, absolutely. So Schoolab is a global open innovation studio. We have offices in Paris and Vietnam, as well as San Francisco. And we've been running student projects based on impact topics with corporate partners for 16 years now. Our SF office is a bit newer. It's only 5 years old. And this is our ninth semester running Deplastify the Planet.
You've got this program of undergraduate and graduate students ready and eager to accept design challenges, and in your case, specific to this the theme of deplastifying the planet. So, am I right then that, as you said, sort of um, corporate partners or whatever however you would refer to them, sort of come to you all with a challenge or a problem that they're trying to overcome, and your program dives in and tries to help find solutions. Is that, in a nutshell, fair enough?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's been a super interesting journey seeing how the program has evolved from really a design thinking core, like really having those design thinking principles and the design thinking process at the core of the program to start inviting sort of other mindsets, other frameworks into the curriculum too. Sustainable design being the major one, and green chemistry also being part of that.
What is it about this this program that focused on design at sort of a larger scale that made it obvious to you that green chemistry needed to be part of this program?
Right. I think the plastics challenge in general is so deeply related to green chemistry because we're talking about materials that have their hazard deeply interconnected with their performance. And green chemistry just has so many examples of these chemicals. And it's important to provide our students with the context and the necessary background knowledge on what's been researched in green chemistry as it relates to the plastics issue.
Terrific. And if folks are, again, before we dive into sort of the details of some of the program, if, whatever the system or the product folks in your program might be trying to redesign, um, what going to the molecular level, what is that offering as a chance to change, just broadly speaking?
Right. So I think at the molecular level, oftentimes people trying to replace plastics in their products don't see any opportunity, right? They really perceive all the alternative materials as technically inferior to plastics. And I think what green chemistry really brings as a valuable perspective is that the way we define performance is oftentimes what's limiting us from finding really innovative solutions to this challenge, right? So how do we really rethink the systems and the chemicals we're using, and we don't just default to kind of the highest performing one size fits all material all the time, because oftentimes that's where we find the hazard really comes out when we default to these overperforming one size fits all chemicals.
Gotcha. Now, let's dive, since Kelly folks has hinted at something we're going to come back to later, which is looking sort of system wide at how to address a problem, how to solve these problems. But let's stay fairly specific for a moment, Kelly, because I think there's an example we've talked about before, in terms of where you're bringing green chemistry thinking into this discussion around the plastics problem, PFAS. So would you mind talking to us about how you're working with the folks in your course there, um, with PFAS and green chemistry?
Right. So I think it's absolutely important to bring up PFAS as a topic to our students because oftentimes the performance that the partner companies are desiring to, find alternatives to plastic to, like say waterproofing, they might start looking at PFAS as kind of an alternative way to impart waterproofing to, say, fiber-based materials. And I think as a course, we really need to make sure the students don't get kind of, I guess, led astray there, and we want to make sure that they understand the full hazard profile of these chemicals before they make that as a proposal to their partners. So we also think there's an interesting opportunity since there's so much new technology and innovation coming out regarding PFAS alternatives. Especially due to regulation coming out around PFAS, that I think there's an overlap there where students can leverage those alternatives in their projects when looking to replace plastics.
Fantastic. And that sort of gets to our earlier point, it seems like, where as you're saying, they're looking to redesign a certain product that's at least presently based in plastic and trying to meet perform when you say performance characteristics, like, what type of performance characteristics are we talking about here?
Right. So if we're talking about packaging, it's very often, barrier properties like oxygen barrier, water barrier. There's also tensile strength, like if you are designing, a bottle that contains some shampoo or some liquid materials, you want to make sure that that stands up to basically any situation a user could put that packaging through and protects the product
Yeah.
from shelf to use. So these are sort of common types of performance metrics that we're looking at. I guess it's also related to performance. It's also the cost at which you can produce these materials, especially
Mhm.
if we're talking about packaging. It's very difficult to justify an increase in cost when it comes to just the packaging portion of a product.
Yeah. So I interrupted myself because I wanted you to put, I think that's fascinating, the performance characteristics, because that's what anchors us, I think, in all of our lives. So anyone watching this, when you go to the store, and Kelly, correct me if there's products that are on your mind that I'm not mentioning, but when you go to a store and you're hoping that that bread is still fresh, or the medicine has been protected from light if it needs to be, air kept in, air kept out, moisture kept in, moisture kept out. All these, the demands that are going to keep food and medicines and other things in our lives from spoiling. Those are what we're talking about here, right?
Right, absolutely. And
Mm.
I think what's so important also is that there's sometimes in the sustainability space, a perception that plastics are all wasteful and that, we should be replacing them at every turn. And I do think alternatives are definitely necessary. However, I think a big part of our course is also teaching our students that we gain a lot of value from using plastics. It's important for us to know that our medicines are safe and our foods are safe to eat. Um, so I think also just providing the context that it goes the other way too. As
Mhm.
humans, we do find value in these things, and those performance metrics need to be preserved when we're
Yeah.
looking at alternatives.
And and again, and I love this because so you've got these students looking at, again, these performance characteristics of a product, and where can you replace plastic or find alternatives. But to circle back to your point at the very beginning of this, which is, by bringing green chemistry in, let's not just look at, is it an, A to A substitution on performance. Yeah, this was waterproof, this is waterproof, it's not plastic, great, right? But your point being that, okay, here's an alternative, but let's also consider, as you suggested, first it's economic performance. Is it providing the same waterproofing? And then finally, this important green chemistry piece, which is using this alternative going to cause other problems related to sustainability or climate change that none of us want, but might be unintentionally brought into a system if people don't have green chemistry in mind. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And I think it's so critical that students know about green chemistry as a concept because it's such a deep bank of information and history where we've seen the same problem in the past. We've seen the same problem of, a chemical we're using all the time is actually toxic. We need an alternative. And there's just been case study after case study of of green chemistry being able to solve that and kind of bring a new approach. So I think I really value green chemistry in our teaching course because it shows students that we've come across these same challenges before and we've found solutions, and that sometimes involves changing what the product looks like. But that's also where design comes in, right? So we're not just looking at the molecular level, can we swap in one chemical for another, but it's also about how the user experiences these products that these chemicals are going to be a part of. And
Hmm.
maybe we can change aspects of the product to make up for those differences in performance when looking at alternative materials. So
Yeah.
looking at it from a really holistic perspective, I think is a great opportunity for innovation in general.
And I want to come back again to that broader look at user experience because again, it's such an important piece. But before we get there, I'm prompted to ask a question. As you work with the folks in your program, and I'm making an assumption here, which is that they're coming in knowing of your programs, like, of Schoolab and Deplastify the Planet's history as a design program against at sort of a larger scale. Um, and then you introduce this idea of, hey, let's bring green chemistry, let's the molecular level thinking into this. What have been their responses to that? Are they, that's not my job, keep it out of here, or have they been intrigued? Like how are your sort of the designers in this program reacting to that introduction?
I think they have been just heartily welcoming this kind of new way of thinking because I think as designers, coming from a purely design background, they often think at the macro level, right? Like, what does the product feel like in the hand? What does the user see when they observe this product? But oftentimes, their challenges can actually be, even more deeply solved if you look at the materials that the product is made out of. And if you start reimagining what different materials these products can be made out of, even if those materials don't exist yet. So I think there's a powerful, I guess, new tool in their toolbox, um, in that we're opening up the scope that you don't need to only play with the materials that currently exist. We can even imagine materials that don't exist yet and how kind of maybe chemists can play a role in making those materials come to life.
Yeah, and that last piece you just hinted at, it ties in. There are going to be other interviews that I do in this series that just so when you talk about green chemistry in education, for example, there's a lot of the professors who are working it into, say, intro level chemistry classes at universities around the world talk about this, where they're like, a lot of the students in this class aren't going to go forward to be chemists, but they are going to hopefully at some be in some parts of their role be interacting with chemists or managing chemists or receiving products from chemists. And I think so what you're doing with your students is arming your non-chemist people with the same knowledge of, we're not saying you need to be a chemist and advance green chemistry, but there's this cohort of experts out there that you can turn to help you in this design challenge. I mean, is that fair to say?
Absolutely, and I think it's
Yeah.
it's also about breaking down that barrier that chemists are not, these people who live in labs and only, look at their chemicals all day. Like
Yeah.
we are also creative people and you can actually bounce ideas off of us. And if you approach a chemist with your challenge, they might actually have really interesting ideas to contribute to it. So I think it's really about fostering this atmosphere of collaboration and really making them unafraid to reach out to others with their ideas and seeing kind of what input they might have for them.
Thank you. And I want to put it out there because I think this might be important for folks listening. Um, when you're talking about the students, what level of education are folks involved in here? Like if someone came to Schoolab and said, I want to be a part of this, um, who's eligible, I guess, to be in the program? What age, what level of schooling, that sort of thing?
Yes, so we host the programs as partners to universities. In SF in particular, we're partnered with UC Berkeley. So all of the students in our programs are graduate and undergraduate students at UC Berkeley, and they take Deplastify the Planet as part of their coursework.
Okay, gotcha. Great. So, all right. So I just wanted to set that context. So there's one a case study I'm looking over here because I'm reading it, reminding myself of it as we speak, that I think we could just touch on briefly because I think it's a wonderful example. Is Faurecia,
Yep.
which was I think an automotive parts company
Yes.
feeding the global auto supply chain, right?
Yes.
Tell us, first of all, I know the company changed its name, so correct that for me if you could. And then tell us just briefly what that specific project, as an example of the work you all do, was all about.
Yes, absolutely. So Forvia has been a partner with Deplastify the Planet for several semesters now, and every every time we have a new project with them, it's always really fruitful and interesting, especially because students don't often get a chance to work with automotive parts manufacturers in their general coursework. But relating to that project that you're bringing up specifically, it was in one of our earlier semesters, the first iterations of Deplastify the Planet. And at that point, the automotive parts manufacturer Forvia, they were looking for alternative materials to construct their car doors out of. Um, and so they brought this great challenge to our class. They were looking at it from both a technical perspective, what materials could actually be used to make up this car door, as well as a supply chain perspective. They were really interested in finding local ways of manufacturing this part rather than shipping materials and shipping finished parts all around the world before being
Mhm.
assembled in a factory. So they were looking at both sides of the coin, materials and supply chain. And the students proposed this really interesting alternative material, which is called henequen. It's a fiber that's native to Mexico, and there's actually a large local industry there processing this fiber into kind of useful fabrics, useful alternative materials with different performance properties. And so the manufacturers were really the auto part manufacturer Forvia, they were very interested in sort of finding this all-in-one ecosystem around this fiber and leveraging that to make car parts.
Wonderful. And here I know, folks listening, this that specific example that Kelly just mentioned was done before sort of green chemistry was starting to become integrated into this program. So, but I think it illuminates a really wonderful example of how going forward a similar project could benefit from the inclusion of green chemistry because
And if I can add,
yeah, please.
I think there were some significant challenges around the technical part, right? Like the
Mm.
students found it really challenging to really approach that specific aspect of the project, and that was part of the motivation for bringing me on as a technical sort of perspective to these various challenges we're having. And it eventually motivated us to bring in more and more kind of material science and chemistry resources to the class.
What's as an example of it, if you can, if you're allowed to share it, what's an example of the, because with you and your green chemistry background, what was a challenge they were facing that signaled this need to involve someone like you as an example in that process?
So, with the students we're bringing in, we can't always predict sort of the exact background they come in with, right? So
Mm.
sometimes, if we have kind of a material science student with the perfect background, then it's a great fit and they don't need as many external resources. But if it's a more multidisciplinary team, students from more a design background, business background, then even just articulating kind of what performance metrics a product needs is difficult for them. And that can be very difficult in then screening out the alternatives that would fit that metric. So, I think a specific example in this case, the material itself was not used in auto parts manufacturing. It was
Yeah.
used for fabrics and it was used for other contexts. And communicating that shift in performance need um, from being a fiber and being a fabric to being a car part is very significant. And I think um, the students found challenge in articulating the exact kind of technical processes needed to make that change.
And just to help folks get a and never mind the listeners, help me get a handle on it. Remind us of the alternative product they were using there. What's it called again? Henneken?
Yes, Henneken.
Henneken. And I don't I'm not familiar with Henneken. So if I were to look at it or look at it in its harvested form, is it a does it look what does it look like that I might be more familiar with? Like a grass? Is it like look like straw or wheat? I'm and yeah, and you don't need to.
Yes, it's an agave plant, so it's like
Okay.
a desert plant. And if
Okay.
you harvest the leaves, I believe you can extract the fibers from it, which are
Okay.
actually quite strong. Yes.
Okay. Well, so you're extracting these fibers that can be then pressed or
Like
woven or
molded, woven, yes,
yeah, yeah.
into really strong fabrics.
Okay, wonderful. And what I was getting at before that I really wanted to highlight for folks here is that again, even though green chemistry wasn't necessarily a specifically you know, spoken part of that project at the time, it highlights a really wonderful example, I think, of where green chemistry could be tremendously beneficial to folks, and that's trying to make that work, which is because it's this larger mold of trying to find products based in renewable feedstocks rather than, say, petroleum. And this show and countless episodes going forward is going to be talking to researchers who, in green chemistry, who are working on at the molecular level, trying to figure out ways to make it so that we can access different renewable feedstocks and transform them and use them to make something like a rigid panel on the interior of a car door where plastic might have been.
Right,
And so
and I
it's
think mhm, and with that kind of extra research and that extra innovation in green chemistry, it really opens the door to using these useful plant fibers with kind of local economies around them instead of petroleum products. So I think
yeah.
there's so much opportunity there if we kind of really focus on green chemistry innovation, and also spreading the word about green chemistry innovation.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. And also as a wonderful example, I think, in terms of that, the target you're trying to hit in terms of, as you said, supply chain, cost, performance, because and for folks, I think what folks have gotten it now, but when you're talking about the corridor, it's not the aluminum or metal or whatever the out exterior is, it's all the handle and the parts that are on the inside of the car that
Right.
we touch. And if there's a part of a car that takes any more, like, daily abuse than that, I'm not sure what it is. So it's gotta be color fast. It's gotta be, you know, not too rigid, not too soft. It's gotta
Mhm.
be attractive, and sourced from a material that's sustainable.
Yep. And talking about the design piece, I think also figuring out how this material in the inside of a car communicates the sustainability to the user is also very interesting, right? Like you wouldn't want to go through all this effort of making a sustainable material and then no one knows it's there, right? It looks just like a piece of plastic. That's oftentimes not where the value is to a user who's trying to buy this product.
Interesting. Can you say there's a couple ways that I can think. Can you say more about that? Or are there other examples that not that you all have necessarily worked on, but that come to your mind that would, because I think I have a sense of what you're talking about, but I'd love to have you articulate it if possible for the audience. When you
Right,
say
like
communicating this to the user,
yes. Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. So I think, if we're putting on our chemist hat and only looking at it from a performance standpoint, then
Mhm.
you might come to the conclusion that, oh, if the user can't tell the difference between these two materials, that's a success, right? When in reality, if we're trying to make sustainable arguments to our user, oftentimes little sort of hints that this is from a natural source, like if there are speckles in a piece of plastic, or
Mhm.
if the paper is brown instead of bleached white, these things actually communicate the sustainability and the bio kind of source of these products to the users, and it can actually make the product more attractive to them.
Which is really, really a cool concept because so far we've been talking, at least, or I've been leading the conversation toward, I should say, the designers looking upstream to the green chemistry folks for help. And I think what I'm hearing from you is it'll benefit tremendously the green chemistry folks, the chemists, to look to your design colleagues for these hints. Like, how does it feel in the user's hand? What is it going to be attractive, and then attractive in a way, as you say, that signals certain things? That's a really interesting, um the relationship that goes back and forth, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Is that
Totally. And I think, as part of this is that as chemists, we often take kind of these performance metrics as they are, right? But as designers, our whole job is to understand the user experience of every product, the user's emotional journey even when they're interacting with the product. So I think in that way, it opens up an interesting conversation of what performance really means. Um, it's because really, if you dig down to it, the user is not going to know the tensile strength of a packaging they're using. They're not going to
Right.
know that. All they're
Hmm.
going to care about is, does this thing work or not?
Yeah.
And that opens up a whole range of opportunities when it comes to design. Um, and maybe there are other ways that this product communicates performance to the user that we aren't even thinking about yet. So there's really an opportunity there, I think, for designers and green chemists to work together to really understand this problem from all angles.
Interesting. They're on the ground at Berkeley in at the Schoolab, and I know folks. I learned of Kelly through Berkeley has a very healthy green chemistry center, green chemistry program, which is how I found Kelly and all this work. As you all are, as your teams at Deplastify the Planet are working on current and future projects, are they crossing boundaries and tapping the chemists on the shoulder and say, "Come on over here, we need your help."
Yes, absolutely. And I've been just a great encourager of this because I think there's so much value in, both the green chemists learning from designers and
Yeah.
designers learning from green chemists.
Hmm.
The Center of Berkeley, Green Chemistry Center at Berkeley, Berkeley Center of Green Chemistry, sorry. Um, they actually have a similar program that's structured in sort of a similar way, but focuses much more on this green chemistry and technical piece. It's called Greener Solutions. And I think what they've cited as a need is that um, they need more diverse perspectives in their classrooms, and they also want to start planting this seed earlier. So, we've really talked to each other as sort of partners rather than competitors at the
Yeah.
Berkeley space. We're not competing for our students. We can actually mutually benefit each other by advertising our classes,
Yeah.
both ways. So, there are ways Deplastify can be a pipeline for greener solutions if there are students really interested in the technical piece and they want to get their hands deeper into this technical problem. On the other side, they can kind of plant the seeds for more students, more diverse students in their classes. And there could be a way for students more interested in the entrepreneurship and business side to come over to our class and learn more. So definitely a collaborative environment at Berkeley around green chemistry and the sustainability topic.
Hmm.
And yeah, lots of great partnership there.
Cool. And I love, again, to complete that thought in terms of what the chemists themselves are getting out of it, the folks in the green chemistry program. And my notes for this episode are essentially, I think the theme is that as it's a really healthy reminder that, green chemistry does not exist in a vacuum. It's not an intellectual exercise. It was founded, it's been pursued to solve very real, very serious problems that we face in the world related to sustainability and climate change. Um, but I would suspect that there are many folks pursuing green chemistry research who, when on a day-to-day basis, they're in deep in the weeds on some molecular process that's, 10 steps upstream from any final product. Though it is so important to those final products, I'm sure it's probably easy for them, especially younger students in green chemistry, maybe to lose sight of the wonderful mission they're on. And does that make sense? And so to me, how cool that they've got some folks around the corner saying, "Hey, here's the mission, help us out." Is that making sense to you?
100%. And I think it's
Yeah.
such a value for not just green chemists, but all chemists, all scientists to understand the power of the right storytelling behind
Hmm.
a project, right? You want to make sure that whenever you're talking about your projects, um, you're bringing it back to why it matters. You're bringing it back to the people it's going to benefit if it makes it into a product, and also make an argument for why it should be in a product. Like these are the things design and entrepreneurship really train. And I think it would be great training if we had more scientists in our class learning about these things.
Fantastic. All right, there's a topic that you tried to go to, Kelly, I think at least twice, and I held you back, because it's a really important one, which has to do with the end user interface, the end users of the things we're talking about.
Right.
And I want to be sure it's on the table because a lot of, so we don't make this mistake, or I don't make this mistake for the listeners, which is, you know, everything in green chemistry is about, okay, you've got a product and X product is being made with this thing, and now let's make it with this thing,
Hmm.
and everything will be great. You, in our previous discussion, and have tried to go there already, have hinted at, before we think about, okay, there's a product here that's made from something we don't want, green chemistry can offer some wonderful alternatives, but there's another consideration here, a larger consideration. Am I making sense in terms of where I'm trying to, what you've hinted at and what our discussion before we hit record was?
Yes, yes. I think it's really about, I hope green chemists, as they're trying to find alternatives, they realize that the products they're replacing are a moving target. They can change in ways, other than just switching out this one chemical. You could switch the formulation, you could switch the packaging, you could switch even the way the user purchases this thing can make a
Yeah,
lot of big effects on whether a green alternative is successful or not. So I think it's if you open up the scope to really, at a systems level, like how these products are designed, consumed, used, disposed of, then it makes the conversation a lot more flexible. You're not thinking, this one chemical exists, I need to replace it with another chemical that does the exact same thing. Maybe you can change other parts of the system to make that possible and make that more feasible, actually.
yeah, yeah. That's it's such a wonderful message, I think, both for the designers at the larger system scale and the green chemists, which is just because X widget has existed for 50 years, it's not about the widget, it's about the thing the widget does for the user.
Right.
And is that need, does it still need to be fulfilled, first of all? And then if it does, is there some other way to solve that without this stuff?
Yeah. In
And
in
literally, and
design,
I think go ahead, sorry.
in design we call this the job to be done.
Yeah,
So every product has a job to be done. It's not this product exists as this product. It's not this shampoo exists as shampoo.
yeah,
The job to
yeah,
be done is cleaning. So
yeah,
how can you think of this in a more conceptual level and find new ways to address that need, without
yeah.
just being hedged into a product or hedged into a chemical?
Yeah, the wonderful Amory Lovins, who's a leading thinker in sustainability, in his book Natural Capitalism, and in other places since then, has put it that it's kind of that next level of what you're saying. He said he would say things like, to paraphrase, no one wants to own a bottle of shampoo.
Hmm.
They want clean hair. No one ever in their right mind says, "Gosh, I wish I owned an air conditioner." It's, I want cool air. And his point in that context was, are there other ways to cool your home besides owning this box? But to bring it back to this point, is for the designers and the green chemists alike to say, okay, if the desired outcome is this, before we simply try to make a one for one swap, what larger, as you said, systems thinking needs to be happening here?
Absolutely.
So very, very powerful. I wanted to make sure that's a whole another episode, I know, but at least want to get it on the table. All right, there's a final piece here, Kelly, that I would love. I think it's a nice way to end this our interaction here because it's very much about the future.
Hmm.
And it's a piece of the work that you all do there at Schoolab, called design fiction.
Yep.
It's a term I hadn't heard before, honestly. I'm not sure if I should be ashamed of that or not, but I'm so excited I've learned about it. Can you explain to our listeners, just generally from your perspective, what design fiction is, how you all use it, and then we'll kind of bring it into green chemistry.
So, first off, I'm not an expert on design fiction, but I am a big
Okay.
fan of design
Yeah,
fiction.
yeah,
And I'd like to just broadly say that design fiction, it's about breaking free of thinking about probable futures. It's breaking free of this very limited scope that we have oftentimes thinking about the future, that, the future is going to look like today. But as we know from various events that happen, say COVID, that oftentimes the future is very different than what we can imagine in the present day. So design fiction is a practice that's all about imagining potential futures, generating artifacts that allow the audience to experience those futures in a tangible way, um, and then collectively imagining what we should do about it and collectively imagining what we can learn from it. So It's much less product focused than, say, design thinking, which is really about solving problems. Design fiction is about asking questions and opening up our perspectives to the future.
Is it, I'm, as you're talking, this comes to my mind, is it seems to me that it's sort of about using hope and imagination as the tools to plant a signpost out in the future for what we would like.
Yes,
And
so,
then
yep.
using that signpost as the target to then come back and aim our design skills toward. Is that?
So I can't say be the official word on design fiction and
Yeah.
all that it can offer, but I do
Yeah.
know that it's about bringing the experience of the future to today and
Yeah.
influencing stakeholders, influencing audiences to imagine what this world might look like and
Yeah.
what implications that has on on today and what steps we can make today to either prevent or move forward toward
Yeah.
those futures.
I think, and my notes are incomplete. I encourage folks to visit the Schoolab page and surf, and I will include links associated with this video to the page that talks about this because it clearly talks about it better than I will. But the parts that I think really resonated with me when it comes to thinking about climate change and sustainability is there was language in there that was all about how the use of design fiction can help the writers and the readers of it reduce anxiety about the future, increase creative thinking in terms of tackling the challenges of that future, um, and other outcomes that you'd like to mention. But those two, at the very least, amping up our creative approach to what's coming, to the challenges, and giving us a tool to sort of replace anxiety with action and hope,
Hmm. And
is tremendously moving to me.
it's also about, I think that anxiety often comes from a need to fix, a need to
Mhm.
see problems, see challenges, fix them. Whereas the whole point of design fiction is, hey, can we think more openly? Can we spot opportunities rather than only thinking about, all these challenges exist in the world. We need to smack them down like whack-a-mole. It's like really about being open to the possibilities that could happen rather than only trying to look at what's probable, what's likely. Because as we see, things are unexpected and we actually can't predict the future as well as we think we can. So why not be open and why not try to spot opportunities rather
Yeah.
than kind of fearing about the future and fearing about the problems we have?
Fantastic. Well, that's, I think, probably a pretty good, darn good place to start to come to a close anyway. But when it comes to green chemistry, design fiction, the future, hope, anything we've talked about, any closing thoughts you have, Kelly, that you'd like to share that are on your mind as you think about the work you all are doing and we all look toward the future?
Yeah, just that I think the answer really lies in, as cheesy as it sounds, working together and, breaking down those barriers to communication. I think we all have something to learn from each other and, design is welcome, should be welcome in chemistry, chemistry should be welcome in design. And I think that's where we're going to find kind of the hope and the answers we're looking for.
Fantastic. And I don't think it sounds cheesy at all, by the way. I don't have time to go into here, but the number, it's the interdisciplinary teams where the magic is found, and there, countless examples through history of that. So I think what you all are tapping into and what you just articulated is not remotely. It's inspiring and wonderful and incredibly important. So thank you, and thank you for sharing all of this with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me, James. This is, amazing, and I really commend the work you guys do at Green Chem Essential.